So the conclusion of the 8 a.m. turn, the fog has lifted. The battle looks about as you'd expect. This is looking to the north. See, the forces are kind of clustering around Hassenhausen, French a little bit south, and the Prussians slowly gathering. There are a couple of Prussian regiments of cavalry here that have been trying to interfere with the French arrival down this road. A little harder with the fog. They tried to be aggressive, took a few too many casualties really, but now with the fog cleared they will be able to really pose a threat to charge any French units into entering here. Swinging around to take a look from the east, looking west here. The French 3rd Division has kind of made its line here, south of Hassenhausen. Still a number of these obscured markers. They've actually been able to do some damage. Every obscured marker can fire, and they managed to hit a few of the cavalry regiments and put some hurt on them. French guns have come up and they put some artillery fire on the Prussians. Prussians are so poor in morale, you're always at a risk of failing anytime they take an odd-numbered casualty, as they did here. But the Duke managed to rally. The 2nd Brigade of the, the 4th Division, Schmettau's division, is moving up here. They're trying to take their historical positions as the remainder of the army kind of comes into view. And that is back here. This is the cavalry, 1st Division cavalry from Kalkruth's Reserve Corps. And then this is Vardenladen's division, I think that's the 3rd, that is marching in from the entry point. And one thing that's interesting is the roads do not pass through the villages. So you can move at your road rate. If you go to move through a village, you're going to pay the village rate. That's very expensive. It's 3 movement points. So it's really a very slow process of marching from this far back, because you have to stop, change formation, either move around or move through the village, and then turn back in the road column. And since there is a village here, Kernstedt, Poppel, Togwitz, it's very slow. So if the Prussians are going to be patient, as I want them to be, they might have to wait a long time before they actually have the forces up, which I guess is slightly historical. But now that the fog is lifted, I think we'll start to see things happening. A lot more reinforcements will come in for the French and for the Prussians, but we'll probably start to see some real contests here along this line in front of Hassenhausen. Conclusion of the 10 a.m. turn here at La Bataille de Hassenhausen. Again, looking towards the north. The field is starting to concentrate around Hassenhausen here. The French have sort of counterattacked the Prussian push on their right and more or less stabilized their line. They've taken pretty rough casualties in the course of doing so, which they can't really afford. The Prussian 4th Division is just barely holding on. They've had a number of battalions disorder and retreat, and then rally, try to get back in the fight. They've also used their cavalry very aggressively and taken quite a few losses, but they have inflicted enough on the French to make it worthwhile, I think. Going in for a closer look, back here in the back from the French perspective on the south end here. Beginning of the 1st Division starting to arrive. 1 battalion of the 17th Regiment is on this road faced by that pretty large regiment of 2nd Division Light Cavalry, who, despite being delayed, the 2nd Division, they raced forward and now put themselves on the road that will definitely disrupt the French arrival of their final division. The French left kind of looks like this. Squares, opposed by a lot of cavalry. That's the 1st Division, heavy cavalry, which is more or less being held by the Prussians. They didn't want to commit it too soon. Moving towards the center, that artillery is definitely holding their middle there pretty effectively, but also they're bolstered by the light regiment of the 1st Division, which raced up the road before it was blocked by that Prussian cavalry. Moving a little further to the east, to the right side, have the balance of the 3rd Division here, which has been fighting pretty hard right now with Schmettau's 4th Division. Pushed back a couple battalions, but because they've taken so many losses, they might be hard-pressed to continue that attack. And that brings us over to the far right, in the 2nd Division. I'd say it's Friant's division, except he was killed in a fluke opportunity charge by some Prussian cavalry. So now they are leaderless. And the French are very, very short on leaders in this game, so they're not likely to be able to put anybody over here. Perhaps the marshal, who is currently in Hassenhausen, can be used to rally, but I don't think he'll be exposing himself to the dangers of any melees. On the far side, most of the French cavalry has put themselves here on the right. They've actually been pretty active trying to countercharge the Prussian cavalry whenever they were exhausted and exposed. Switching to the Prussian perspective, this is the 2nd Division, which I think is Arnhem's division. And after several delays, they were delayed pretty significantly, they're finally getting on the field. But they arrive in the far northwest corner of the map here at Auerstedt, and they have a long way to go to reach the field. So they march up this road. Got to go that far just to get to Grunstedt, which is itself a long way off. We move a little further to the south. We finally see the 3rd Division, which is kind of broken into 2 brigades, one here and one there. And they still haven't gotten engaged. So they have probably one more march to get close enough to even try to get after the French. I think they'll be lining up here on the right of the line and trying to hit those squares. The 1st and 3rd Division cavalry here has basically just been waiting. Their principal purpose is to try to keep the French occupied, not moving forward. They're so strong, they have such huge melee values. The French are pretty well advised to stay in square formation to avoid any chance of breaking and getting run down. There's the king. He's been busy rallying forces. The few battalions that end up back here usually get picked up by him. He's had some luck rallying. And then there's Schmettau's division. Again, they're largely centered on this location here, extending to there. Their artillery has been pretty effective, throwing some fire at the French, keeping them at bay, but this little position right here is in a very precarious situation. The French are in mass, and they definitely have a numerical advantage here. And if they punch a hole through, it could definitely unhinge this whole left of the Prussian line. They're very weak in infantry. All they have is this cavalry right here to oppose, the 2nd French division, which is coming in right there. At this point, the real danger that the Prussians can pose is right here with this regiment. They are behind the lines. They are gigantic, so they're going to have a massive melee punch. And they could definitely charge anything coming up the road, and also just turn on any of these 2nd Division battalions even without charging, they can move and melee them in the flank or rear and really, really hurt the French. So the French will probably have to pivot some of their cavalry, keep some infantry in squares. This is the worst thing for the French because they just don't have a good way to counter that light cavalry. So it really has been kind of historical to this point. The Prussians have been arriving one division at a time, not fighting very cohesively. Probably the only difference is the little better success of the Prussian cavalry. Historically, they routed and left the field on the left side of the line there, but they're staying pretty active here. So we'll get probably 2 more hours in, 6 more turns to the noon turn, and check in to see how the battle's progressed.